You got everybody, Heidi? Hello, Heidi.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we are just transferring live. We are ready to go.
You ready to go?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Can't hear you very well.
I'm sorry, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, are you ready to go?
Yes, we're ready, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. City of Segovia City Council Budget Workshop Session, Friday, May 8th to 20 at 2 p.m. Go ahead, Ange, or Cassidy, or Heidi.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I hope everybody had a chance to at least briefly glance over the packet that was sent this morning. I can get that a yes, that everybody got a chance to actually look over it.
Yes.
Yes, I did.
Okay, great.
I have a question.
So
In
we'll
the second,
we'll just jump right into there with that page 4 of the packet.
okay, was it Cassidy? Seems how she sent out a second. Is anybody else getting all that squabble?
Yeah, I can hear it too. It's awful.
Yeah, high speed. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but the second email that Heidi sent out, is it any different than the first one? She sent out a corrected one. Is that only the time that was corrected, you know, or if there, I read the previous one, but not the one that just got sent out.
Yes, it was just the time.
Okay, all right, thanks, good.
So we know that CARES funding and the legislators are still making that decision of the appropriation for CARES Act funding for municipalities. They were meeting on Wednesday, 2 days ago. They were supposed to meet at 1 o'clock and they had canceled that meeting, and they're due to meet on Monday and hopefully vote on that appropriation and move forward with it. Again, we're waiting on them before we know final details about the CARES Act funding, but I approached the budget with the assumption that that will be going through. I don't have any reason to believe that it won't go through. It's just a matter of when it's supposed to be going through and coming to us via the state when they get their ducks in a row up there, down there. But I did want to let you know that the CARES Act for the allowable expenditures, it's still following the guidelines from OMB, and that is included in your packet. So it lays out COVID-19 related expenditures, how it relates to us and managing and mitigating COVID-19 in the community. And I've laid out a CARES Act or a COVID-19 fund. I put aside an actual fund account as a special revenue account that breaks out that funding and those expenditures. So I want to, there we go. Okay. So we're going from the guidelines from the state, OMB, and a lot of discussions that local leadership has been having along with AML about CARES funding and how it pertains to municipalities. So I wanted to make clarification that in the community disbursements for the CARES Act, how it's listed, it does indicate in one column, in the initial column, it has a cap they're referring to it as a community assistance payment based. And I just want to clarify that that won't be in addition to our community assistance that we're already slated to receive. But that is that amount that's listed on the distribution pages are the formula for community assistance was used. But the funds are still restricted to COVID-19 expenditures. So I just want to make that clarification. I know Vivian had that question earlier, and I just wanted to clarify to the group that cap, it indicates that it could be, it leads someone to believe that it could be a cap amount, but it's just based on the formula, and that those funds are restricted. So, sorry, I'm bouncing up here. We're not exactly sure when the CARES funding is going to come through. Again, we're waiting on the Monday meeting, and hopefully legislative approval will push that appropriation through. But once we get that information and get more clarification and certainty from the state, I will be sure to pass that on to the council as we become aware of it. We're waiting just as long as the rest of the state is and the municipalities are on that funding. So we're all kind of staying really closely in tune with what's going on in Juneau and the legislators, the legislative session, which is hopefully in the next few weeks we'll find out. So that money will be able to be used in this fiscal year and in this upcoming fiscal year. So it's the allotments are for COVID-19 related expenditures, and what that looks like for this fiscal year, I will give an update on Monday. We have incurred COVID-19 related expenses, but we're still finalizing those reports and those classifications as we do accounts payable, because some of the bills are still coming through. But it will be able to be used in both fiscal years, the remainder of FY20 and going into FY21. It is, where municipalities are required to expense or all expenditures, it will be until the end of December. So the OMB guidance document says December 30th of 2020 is the last date that those funds will be available. So we have just roughly over 7 months. And again, once those processes for expenditures and how we're going to be reporting them, how they're expected to be audited and all of those details will be coming out, hopefully once the appropriation gets approved. Is there any questions about the CARES piece before we jump into the budget piece?
Yeah, Cassidy, this is Vivian. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, back on your memo, the second page 5 at the top, I just want clarification where it talks about FEMA versus CARES and the advantage of pursuing FEMA reimbursement, blah, blah, blah. And that FEMA, anyhow, what I'm getting at is reading that paragraph. Am I incorrect when we had our discussion about the 50% off commercial water fees as a subsidy for our businesses? Weren't we looking, didn't we think that FEMA was our backup plan? But when I read this, it's
FEMA, those costs would not be eligible through FEMA. FEMA is emergency management and mitigation funds. So that would be for material supplies, COVID-19 related personnel expenses that we can submit to FEMA. The COVID-19 utility relief proposal could be funded through the CARES Act. That specific question has been asked to the legislatures, and to OMB. And we think that there is the availability to have CARES funding cover those expenses in that as a relief program to customers.
Okay, so I was a little bit off there. So it is FEMA, but it's relief through CARES program. Is that what you said? Somehow when we had our discussion, because I remember asking that we would be reimbursed, and I thought it was FEMA because it was easier, but then I read this and it got a little bit confusing to me. But what you're saying is, I thought what I just heard is FEMA has monies that FEMA has is under the CARES program that would work for this relief program if need be.
No,
No.
CARES and FEMA are two separate reimbursement and funding sources. FEMA money, we can submit reimbursements to FEMA through a really long process, but for COVID-19 related expenses, those expenses do not include any relief programs that we're offering to our customers. The CARES Act, the wording in the guidance from OMB indicates that we could use the CARES Act funding for that relief program for our customers.
Okay, that's good. Okay, I must have been confused on
Does
my
that-
end. Yeah, that answers it. I just
Okay.
thought when I said yes, I would go for it, it's because there was definitely some way the city was going to be reimbursed. And I thought, okay, that's good. As long as, under my impression and why I voted for it was that there would be a great chance of reimbursement.
Yes, there
Okay.
is through CARES Act.
Okay, okay. All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So Cassidy,
Mm-hmm.
so unless I missed it somewhere, which I might have, I'm sorry, but so are they still trying to figure out if the CARES, any of the funding can be used for loss of revenue? Are they still tossing that around, or has that been nixed totally?
So far, that is, there's been talk, but it's still slated that CARES funding is not for loss of revenue.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. There's always a but. If you look, we'll find where this is. Senator Sullivan and Senator Murkowski just is the co-sponsor on this bill. You look on page
Pages.
40 of this packet. This is a draft that Senator Sullivan has put through to Congress to allow coronavirus relief fund payments to be used to replace revenue shortfalls resulting from COVID-19. This is, I don't have any more details. I was provided this draft just the other evening, and I'm not sure where this will go, how far this will go, and when that will, and if it does pass, then yeah, we're gonna be playing with a new set of rules and I'm sure a new set of to the state level. But Senator Sullivan has heard our requests to have this CARES funding help us with revenue replacement and the shortfalls that we're going to be feeling as in our general fund and as a community and others as well. This is the biggest concern that communities have, is that the economy is, the ripple effect goes out to not just businesses, but then it also affects our bottom line. So stay tuned and keep in touch with Senator Sullivan and Murkowski about how this is going to go forward, or if it's going to go forward.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I looked through all this, but it's mind-boggling. And okay, well, so we're still back to the same thing of them deciding then whether it's possible.
So
Maybe.
and you know, anything's possible, but it's also a bureaucratic system. And so
Oh,
the
yeah.
that we're going forward now because we are needing to have our budget, and we're trying to operate in the here and now, and not necessarily wait for these decisions to be made at those higher government levels. That we're operating on the assumption that the CARES funding as of right now cannot be used for revenue replacement.
Right. Okay, thanks.
So if we go into the budget summary on page 6, this just gives you kind of a brief summary in all of the departments in the general fund and all of our special revenue funds, what the significant impacts are in our FY21 budget and what were the changes that were made during the development of this budget. So just an overall piece of information is that our annual personnel expenses, and this is for all departments that include wages, salaries, and liabilities, are out about 402,000, projected 402,000 this year. Last year, we operated at 509,000. So I've cut that, the personnel piece down about a little over $100,000 annually. Now, that wasn't easy to do, but because our general fund revenues, I projected them, personal property tax and real property tax are at a 10% decrease for this year from 20, and a 35% decrease in sales tax revenue. And those are huge hits for us. How that filters out through the rest of the budget for general fund expenditures is that our personnel expenses, which is our largest expense, we don't have a lot of leeway to do many more cuts than what we've already done and what we've been doing in the past. We operate on a shoestring. That's the way that we've always operated. We don't have a lot of extra income coming in to take care of anything outside of our essential services. So the personnel expenses, we've reduced service and operations going from a 40-hour work week for employees down to a 30 to a 32-hour work week, depending on the position. This will filter through services to our community. And there really isn't much more I can cut. And that is a reality that we're facing in the COVID-19 world right now. Water revenues, I have, we continue, we're at the 1.4% COLA increase as we had discussed with the fee schedule. July and August are calculated with the 50% COVID-19 commercial utility relief program that's implemented in there. But for our payroll expenses in there, I had to keep our water treatment plant and our water personnel expenditures remaining the same in order to keep and maintain the water plant operations as they are. The time that we allocate and appropriate to that department is the minimum that we can devote in order to keep it fully functional and keep the testing and the water requirements. So that department is fully operational without any cuts. The administration and the other personnel expenses from our end here at the office were cut by that percentage, but the operators' wages and time was not cut because we didn't have any, we couldn't afford the cuts there.
Cassie, what does that actually mean? Taking 25%, that's a big cut, but what does it actually mean? administration and personnel expenses reduced by 25%. If it's not the water treatment utility,
It means the time that we have to do billing, to take care of customer complaints, to do water turn-ons, to do any other water services, and sewer. This sewer is runs right alongside of it. We just won't have the staffing available to do anything further than billing and water operations. So we're going to be pretty stretched really thin here at the office. We kind of already are, but the time that we take, because we spend quite a lot of time on the phone with people,
right?
water rates, fee schedules, water turn-ons, we have a leak here, we have something there. That time that we've allocated is cut.
And so that means that a person who's trying to call to talk about water bill will just hear from you in 4 weeks as opposed to the next day, pretty much. Is that what we're saying?
Well, I'm not going to say where they're not going to hear in 4 weeks, but it's not going to be within the 24 hours that we normally
So it's
respond.
gonna be
Right.
pushed back. So everything's going to be still maintained. It's just going to be pushed back. Try and be pushed back. That's a lot. That's a lot to be able to handle with, I was just trying to figure out how you could cut 25%, but it sounds like you've got it figured out. Okay. I mean, it's a has-to situation.
Yeah, and like I had said in the memo, we know that this budget year and this fiscal year is not going to be static. We know that we're going to have to be watching it more than we usually do in terms of operational costs, expenditures, and what's happening with our economy. And we will be making adjustments as that goes on. That's just that's the state of affairs, I think, right now for local municipalities, is that we know just because we're setting a budget right now, that it may change drastically by August, the way that COVID-19 has changed everything. And we will be either nipping and tucking some more, or maybe we're going to be seeing a bigger swing and an increase in sales tax revenues, and that will take us into a better functioning operation here. But it's almost impossible to tell.
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
So sewer operational costs, we remained flat, and there was $11,000 of major maintenance and repair that we would typically put into that department. But because the dock revenues were so short, we did another transfer from the sewer to the dock. And that is based on the scheduled stops that Alaska Marine Highway has published right now, is through September. They have not given us any idea of what they're going to give us next year. And I assumed that the ferry schedule and the number of stops is how we operate our dock fund. We have a contract with the state, and for every stop that they make, they pay us XYZ according to the dock, or according to that contract. And it's based on the number of ferries we have. And right now we have 44 ferries from June until September. And then it's hard to know what's going to happen next year with the ferry. So the dock revenues in there, I didn't want to assume that we're going to have a full ferry schedule next spring and write a budget where that's not going to be the case. So those numbers have decreased significantly, and that's based on the information that we know right now. Harbor revenues, we have, we're anticipating a 17% decrease in stall rental. That mostly will be mortgages since the mandates have been, the reopening plan from Governor Dunleavy has been released in these last few weeks. And the travel restrictions have somewhat lightened up, and it's looking that we're, the state is looking towards, you know, a more open type of atmosphere where we've had some of our mortgages that were on the fence actually commit and pay for their mortgages for the year. So they feel comfortable about that, but we are still anticipating a large decrease in the number of transients and just more temporary boat landings. Our tour boat landing fee, I put at just right about half. And again, we can adjust that as the season goes on. If it looks like we're getting more tour boat passengers, then we can adjust. But I felt like having a significant decrease in there is a reality for right now, since the state travel mandate is interstate mandate is still in effect, and intrastate mandates with community to community travel being permitted, but only on the road system. We're not sure when the travel to off the road system communities is going to be allowed. So for the harbor expenditures, personnel expenses, excuse me, we've reduced those hours and the operating hours. Usually in the summer, we're operating at 13 hours a day. We've cut that back to 8 hours a day. Layla will be available. She will also be available by phone. So if somebody comes in, they can give her a call, but we are not, I have not scheduled or budgeted for our regular harbor assistance, which is about $10,000 annually that we needed to cut. So we can adjust, but it's difficult to know at this point of how the summer is going to end up. And we're trying our best with the budget that we have. So pages 8 through 24 is just more COVID-19 CARES Act funding relief information. There's some really good information in there if you have some questions and want some specific details about the fund and the program. Those documents are very useful and most up to date that we have right now. On page 26 and 27, now this is the CARES Act funding budget. It's been recommended by OMB and AML to make the CARES Act COVID-19. I made a COVID-19 class. That's how we're tracking our expenditures right now, is we're classing all of our expenditures in that class. And we have anticipated, maybe we're going to get 254,000 through December of 2020. Of that is COVID-related expenses for mitigation planning and management. That includes personnel costs for all departments. We have, right now I'm writing the City of Seldovia's public space campground and city building operations plan. What that includes, that goes along with the mandates, is that we have to have a significant amount of staff training and staff involvement for COVID-19. So there'll be a lot of time spent by everybody right now on COVID-19. I know myself, I'm spending well over half of my time is spent on COVID-19, and the allocations that I've broken out. Let me just look at this real quick. I have the city manager allocation for COVID-19 management is 25%. The finance officer will be 20%, clerk will be 20%. Our chief of police is actually at 35%. A huge chunk of his time right now is spent with COVID management. And then along with our EMS department and our fire department, those expenses will be included. Now, the harbor master, public works, our senior meals employees, our ferry employees, they will also be spending some amount of time with COVID management, at least at the beginning, for training and implementing our disinfecting schedules and anything that goes along with the management side of it, for wiping down and cleaning the buildings and making sure everybody has PPE and logging who comes in where, and keeping track as needed by the state. We'll be spending a lot of our time doing that this year. And that's what these expenses are indicating, is those allocations. And they're subject to change, but it's also subject to change based on what the legislators appropriate. So this is an idea of what our expenditures are going to look like as of now. They could change after Monday, but the decision is at the state.
So looking at this, does it look like $34,000 has been expended?
No, that is what's left. And these expenses are an idea of what we will need for signage, PPE, anything that we're going to need for, our technological costs that we've incurred, the Zoom meeting, any of that stuff is covered under the CARES Act funding. So the 34,000 is what is left over after we've budgeted that first round of expenditures.
And this budget that you've got, is this a proposed budget that you're based on how expenses have gone up to this point?
No, this is based on FY21 allocations that we've pulled out of to make our general fund and our special revenue funds. And this is 25% of my time will be spent on COVID. 35% of the police officers' time is going to be expended to COVID. Any signage, any hand sanitizers, any business programs, anything related to COVID-19 is expended in here for FY21.
Okay.
So I have a question again. I'm not quite getting it. But so the $220,000, we can account for all that, and with that'll be CARES money we can keep?
We have to spend it on COVID-19 related expenditures.
Right, and all these
Proposed expenditures for FY21.
And you're saying all these expenditures that add up to that are okay?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. Well, that's good then.
Well, it's still just a piece of paper at this point.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, all right, well, okay. Hopefully it'll
Right, so if you,
turn out that way.
right, so if you look, sorry,
No, go,
if you look at this then Kathy, and I'm sorry, are you done, Bobby?
yes, I'm done.
Okay, just for clarification, so if all of this is accepted, the $220,000 accepted and we are reimbursed from CARES program, which basically means that it's that amount of money, the $220,000 that we have not had to take out of our own coffer. And it'll be reimbursed back. And if that happens, our physical outlook is much better. Because we are still, the city of Seldovia is personally not out $220,000 if all of these items are covered under the CARES program. Is
Correct.
that a good way of looking at it?
Yes, so the disbursement, if you look at the top of page 26, we go, I wish I could point. So on the top of this, right there, at the very top up here, shows you the outlay, where the cap formula allotment is the 146,000, then the direct cost distribution, $108,554. That $254,000 is what is the community disbursement for the city of Seldovia for CARES Act funding that is on the table right now at the state.
Right.
That, if that appropriation goes through, that is the money that we will be anticipating. And there's a series of payments, but that money will be anticipated to be received by the city of Seldovia. Though that money will then go into the cost of our operations managing and mitigating COVID-19 through December 30th of this year.
Okay, good, thank you.
Anybody have any more questions about this slide at this time? All right. Okay. Heidi went down to the next one. So with that 30, nope, back up Heidi, please. Down to page 27. There we go. So with that, so those COVID-19 expenses are ones that we are expecting to incur. But that does give us a $34,000 amount that we could theoretically either find more COVID-19 related expenses directly related to our departments, such as EMS, any additional supplies or anything that they would need to respond to COVID-19. Some communities are looking at programs for their business communities where there's a grant program set up, a COVID-19 grant relief program set up. That's a concept that's been thrown out there. That just will help economies and their business sector get through this hard time. But my recommendation is right now, with what we know or what we don't know, I feel like any ideas of programs or additional concepts that we may have for those funds would be developed at a later date. And when we know more and when we get a better sense of how COVID-19 needs to be managed here. I would hate to write this budget, receive money, put through all this programming, and then in October we have a huge outbreak where we have to spend a lot of time, money, and resources to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's it. There's so many uncertainties with this virus, and I think it's early enough right now that to be very conservative with our approach is, I is probably the healthiest, most responsible way that we can approach this this virus, and in terms of funding. So that's just my recommendation at this time. We are thinking about ideas of what we can do for our business sector and what we can do for our community. But before that, we need to make sure that we have all the resources and materials and pieces in place to manage and effectively provide services to our community as it directly relates to COVID-19 if need be. Any questions on that? No. Okay. So we can go down, and this is the budget as proposed with all of those changes and those figures in place. You can see where in 21, where in property tax and in our tax generated revenues, they're significantly different than they were in the previous year. And maybe that'll change for the better. It's hard to say at this point, but these are things that we will be looking at on a very regular basis and watching the trends and watching what our year brings. But this is the proposed budget, and we can go through. If somebody has any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, this is the draft that I came up with for FY21. One sidebar is the public safety assistance. Chief Cushman we made another request to public safety for additional public safety assistance. We have not heard back from the agency. So we've flat funded that at 20,000 again.
On a side note, are all of the price of heating fuel went down? So is the city tapping off all their tanks by any chance?
I know our multi-purpose building got filled yesterday, and I'm not sure if the status of the rest of the buildings have been filled.
Okay. Are they on a regular monthly fill sort of thing?
They are.
Okay.
It went down to $2 and something.
Yeah, it's 260 or 70, and that should last through past December, I would think.
That price?
Yeah, it's going to be this price till the next March, and
Okay.
barring any unforeseen stuff, we should be good till December.
So a nice change.
What's that?
It's a nice change.
Yeah, definitely. It came at the right time.
Cassidy, where's the community assistance funds at $78,000? Where's that entered? I always forget.
It's on our general fund state revenue. It's on page 28.
Okay, right off the top. Gotcha. And does the staff is, I'm sure, well aware of the cutbacks in their hours?
Yes.
Hmm.
And also, you're gonna have to calculate in the tax loss for the amount of heat fuel they'll go through this year will probably be more, but at half of the tax.
Cassidy, could you go over the water 510 account, the major maintenance repair funds? So if I read this right, these are what we have in our actual major maintenance repair funds in each one of these categories.
Yep, in each one of these categories, this is what has been allocated for the last 5 years.
Mhm. That's great. I mean, it's great to see there's money in the account, I guess is what I'm
There
saying.
is, and for instance, for boat haul out, we and did a lot of construction on our big boat. So that money is going to be decreased, but we've been making efforts to put money into the major repair funds for those special revenue accounts, particularly water. Since we know that we have aging infrastructure, it's important that we are setting aside and budgeting for those major repair projects. We've had 2 in the last month, so if that gives you any indication, we're anticipating spending a lot of time on those pieces of infrastructure that are aging, and our water and sewer system are part of that, a big part of that.
Yes, okay, thank you. And how do you feel, as city manager, how do you feel our budget looks? How do you feel about things right now?
To be quite honest, I'm quite anxious. Things are just really uncertain, so it's hard to say what to expect, and that's my style, if you know me. But we're as a group, I know, and as a team, I know that all of us are on board with, of course, doing more with less is what our motto is. We know to do that more this year than ever, but then also manage COVID-19 in our communities. This is definitely the hardest budget I've ever had to develop and put together. And I think, comfort wise, it comforts me knowing that we can make changes. Just because this is presented right now we know that this probably will not be, this isn't set in stone. So that is it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, but it also makes me aware of how vigilant that we need to be fiscally, and be monitoring every piece of our fiscal position right now. and how important that is, because it seems like COVID showed up in February and gave everybody a real swift kick in the butt and leveled us all as to a certain degree. And now we're trying to pick up the pieces, and picking up the pieces and rebuilding aren't going to be as quick as when we got knocked down. So that's a little nerve wracking. The price of oil and the state is also concerning on many levels.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate. Sending out to the public, the hours, that'll be June 30th or July 1st, then the change of hours for employees. Is that what we're going to enact it then with the budget?
Yeah. So
It'll be the-
if this is looks fine as a draft, this will be introduced. It's scheduled to introduce on Monday. You know, since we are at this point, we will be having staff meetings about this and about specifically about our reopening plan and our operations plan for buildings, properties, and employees. So that's all a part of our big discussion that we'll be having as a staff.
Right, right. Mhm. Somebody must be walking in the wind.
I believe it's
Is there anything
Pearlie.
else
I-
then? Okay. Oh. Walking in the wind.
So I invite you
And the
guys
fee
to
schedule will be-
read. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just invite you guys to look this through some more and go through it, read the pieces and parts, and if there are questions or you need clarifications or you have suggestions or anything, reach out to me. But this is what we're looking at for 2021, and subject to a lot of things, significant things, but we're just gonna keep rolling with the punches, I guess, and just we'll be flexible and we'll try to make do with what we've got.
Right. Well, sadly, to fix any budget, sadly, it's the employees, it's the wages and salaries that make the difference in a budget. So sadly, that's where it's at, to make a big dent. So I appreciate the hard choices you've made. And I appreciate the staff and the employees who hopefully understand where we're sitting. And like we keep saying, things can change. You know, things, it's at this point, it's kind of a good thing. It is a live document that can possibly change depending on how things move along to the better, we hope. Yeah.
Have we taken any comments from the audience? Is there an audience?
Mr. Mayor, there is nobody in the public in attendance at this time.
Okay.
Hopefully these two bills they have in will go through this what is it, 2 and A bill on page 43 or 40.
Yeah, I'll be keeping an eye on this to see how far it goes. I haven't heard one way or the other. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I appreciate Senator Sullivan and Senator Murkowski going to bat for municipalities and recognizing that the brunt of our challenge is going to be in making up lost revenues. And that's not just for municipalities, that's for businesses. That's for anybody that's trying to operate in this economy. And they're suffering huge losses because of COVID-19. And so recognizing that and trying to assist us and support us in that is I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I do also. That's the way it's set up is primarily medical. If they can get these two through, it'll make a big difference.
So not a bad idea to email both senators and thank them for their support and put that little bug in their ear. Doesn't hurt to have support on this end.
Not at all. It's always nice to hear positivity in this line of work.
Mhm.
I don't have anything further unless anybody else has something to comment or offer.
Not at this time. I'm good. Thank you.
I'm good with it at this time.
I'm good too.
George Pearlie, how you doing?
Well, since I get unmuted here, I'll tell you that I'm doing fine, and I too am done.
10:32, yeah.
Pearlie, you okay?
Oh, could be.
It appears that we lost Pearlie about 5 minutes ago, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So if nobody has anything, we'll adjourn.
All right.
Thank
Everybody
you all
feel
for
good?
making time on a Friday afternoon for us in such short order.
Yep.
But I felt like it was important for us to touch base and really be able to feel like we have to discuss these things and have you guys digest it before the introduction on Monday. And I didn't want to rush through a work session on Monday in case there were changes or developments on Monday that needed to be implemented. So I appreciate you guys making.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Okay.
Cassidy
Thank
and
you for all
Heidi.
your hard work.
The
See
meeting's
you on
adjourned.
Monday.
We'll see you in 2 hours, about 2 hours, 3 hours, 6
What?
o'clock. Meeting's adjourned.